When I tell people that I'm a philosophy major, I'm normally met with a scoff or something like a pitied, condescending look, and I get it. Philosophy is an easy punchline. Would you rather your daughter bring home a doctor, or maybe a lawyer? Or hey, what about a professional thinker? But regardless of all the criticisms, philosophy isn't useless, and if we want to create a better world, it is essential for Gen Z to philosophize. We've started at a disadvantage. We had the curse of being the first generation to basically experience our entire lives with social media and smartphones. We have been surrounded by an overwhelming amount of information since we were children. Philosopher Jean Baudrillard wrote a book called Simulation and Simulacra that served as the inspiration for The Matrix and was required reading for the cast, and I feel it is especially pertinent for our modern world and needs to be heard by our generation in particular. The easiest way to understand his theory is by thinking of maps. A map ideally corresponds to reality, and if it is accurate, it helps us to navigate through the world. Media and art also function similarly to maps, but instead of just telling us there's a lake over here, it might tell us it is wrong to kill. The problem is that now so much media is being created that it has put us into an era of what Baudrillard called hyper-reality. He basically claimed that media has now become such an inextricable part of our reality that it now must reference itself. So media is changing the world, and our maps are becoming maps of the media. So basically, our maps are now pointing toward themselves, and we are producing copies of copies of copies. So this is kind of confusing, but what's a more simplified example of this? If I told you to draw a platypus, would you draw this? Or would you draw this?
Perry the platypus!
If you drew Perry, which I imagine some of us would, your drawing wouldn't be a copy of a platypus, it would be a copy of a platypus, or a simulation of a simulation. So now we can start to see a problem. We learn history, get political information, and see portrayals of other people and cultures through this media, which builds upon itself and gets farther and farther from the truth, and in a way is attempting to redefine the truth through this process of self-reference. We scroll through TikTok or Instagram for hours, seeing infinite competing concepts of good. There are dizzying amounts of information and truth claims bombarding us at all times. We have dealt with this overabundance of values and explosion of meaning more so than any generation that has come before us. Is there a way out of this technological dystopia? I'm not sure, but philosophy can definitely help. Philosophy isn't just a bunch of old men arguing about whether or not the world is imaginary. Don't get me wrong, there is definitely plenty of that, but it has also played an irreplaceable role in shaping the world as we know it. The US Constitution, our legal systems, and political parties are all molded by philosophy. In order to have courts, we had to have a theory of what justice means. In order to have political parties, we had to argue about the role of government. And these aren't just simple questions with simple answers, and the work definitely has not just all been accomplished by the ancient Greeks. The world is changing quickly, and it requires deep and evolving philosophical thought. It doesn't need to be so intimidating either, because we really do it all the time. The way Gen Z is conceptualized gender, it focuses on what defines a human and understands the self as something transcendent instead of binary. When we talk about human rights, we are claiming that all humans have intrinsic worth and that worth implies something. When we argue about abortion, we are trying to understand the limits of autonomy and the definition of what makes a life a life. And we don't just do it politically either. In relationships, which aren't nearly as simple as they are portrayed in our maps, we have to think about what unconditional love means and what level of suffering we should take on for those who we love. In our social roles, be it father, son, friend, student, we have to have an idea of what responsibility means and what actions are demanded from us based upon the categories we fall into. When you make decisions as to what type of job or major you want, you are deciding what your concept of the good is. Do you think a life should be spent making money and creating wealth to pass down for generations? Or do you think a life should be lived seeking value and beauty apart from financial concerns? These are all important questions we answer every day, regardless of whether or not we want to. Our generation will soon be in charge, and it's important that we see through all the vapid media claiming to be true but just designed to catch our eyes, because we are going to create and mold the world according to our philosophies. So it's important that we learn to do it well. Plus, you get to wear a toga.